aka Resendy Card Ranger. Little different video for you today. I bought my first pre-war card. I've always been to vintage lately and all the way through modern, but this is my first pre-war card. And to make a long story short, quite a while back, Alex Bowen 53 showed this book on his channel. Has amazing pictures of, just as it says here, the golden years, 1886 through 1956 by Frank Slocum. And I started looking through it, doing a little research, looking at some history, and here I am. So I got my first pre-war card. Excited to show it to you. Go with my cat, sound like a horse. So I looked up the history of the player, the time he played, where he played, the tobacco industry of what's on the back of his card, and so I thought I'd share that with you. So a little bit of history about the card and the player, and hopefully it'll be fun. New for me, and it was fun to make. So let's do a 180. I'll show you the card and get into it. All right. So the card I picked up is a T206 Sherry McGee with bat. So I just wanted to share the card with you. I mean, it's in great. I mean, it's a beautiful card to me. It looked wonderful. It's just great, authentic by SGC. My guess, if I had to guess, is it's probably been trimmed on the corners. The corners look way too round and perfect. So I think someone tried to make them look better. Same on the bottom, to be honest. I don't think any other coloring was done or anything. I don't have a loop. I am going to get one. So I think it's authentic because of that purpose. So something had to be altered here, right? But it is a beautiful card. So happy to have it. Man. So I thought I'd share with you, what I researched and what I found about Sherry McGee and the time he played. So his full name is Sherwood Sherry McGee, and he actually grew up in Clarendon, Pennsylvania, which is outside of Pittsburgh. It's actually 140 miles north of Pittsburgh, near New York. And he was with the Phillies for 11 years. So he started in 1904 with the Phillies and played through 1914. And he was actually found by a scout, Jim Randall, who happened to get off a train in Carlisle, PA, which is outside of Harrisburg. And he overheard a conversation of people talking about this local, really good baseball player. So he stopped to watch him play, literally offered him a contract that day, and by the next day, McGee was in Philly practicing with the team. So talk about crazy. The Phillies had a great outfield in 1904. They had Shad Berry, Roy Thomas, and John Titus. So they had a great outfield going into the season, but an injury to Titus caused the outfield to shift around. So 2 days after arriving in 1904, with the Phillies, McGee was starting in left field. So he had a quick start there. And he never left. So from that day forward, he started every game. Well, I should say he started every game. He played every year, was a starting left fielder for the next 11 years. So that is amazing. He was their cleanup hitter and one of the premier hitters in the dead ball era. He quickly became the best defensive outfielders of his day, and if we were to talk about him today, he would literally, we would use the term a five-tool player because he could do it all. He had speed, he could hit, everything, field. He was in the top 10 in home runs and RBIs 7 times in his career. He led the league in RBIs 4 times, but 1910 was his best year, where he led the league in almost every category. And the biggest feat may have been defeating Honus Wagner for the batting title that year. And he hit .331. And that's a big deal because Honus Wagner had reigned as the batting champion for 8 years. So 1900, 03, 04. Then from 1906 through 1909, he was the batting champion. McGee was 1910 and Honus Wagner back in 1911. So that's a pretty cool feat to be at least thrown in those years with Wagner. He was known as a hothead, though. So at one point in 1911, he knocked out an umpire after disputing a called third strike. So he wasn't happy with the call. He was suspended. And one clip I found in a newspaper article is one Philadelphia reporter called him as gentle and good-natured as an old woman. So that kind of sums up his, I guess, his attitude there for a while. Ironically, after his playing days, he became an umpire and was actually well respected for his judgment and his demeanor on the field. So, go figure. I mean, I guess, time does mellow all of us with age, right? So he was traded in 1914 to the Braves, Boston Red Sox. And the interesting part is, and the irony there is, in 1915, after he was traded before the season, the Phillies actually won their one and only pennant while at the Baker Bowl, the first year right after he left. So it's kind of ironic. Philadelphia lost in the World Series that year after winning the pennant to Boston in 5 games. And interesting stat here is the Baker Bowl was demolished in 1950, which was the next time the Phillies would win the pennant, but in Shibe Park. Cue Ashburn photo. so all roads here for me always lead back to the Whiz Kids. The irony, hey, 1950 was the next pennant they ever won, and it was the Whiz Kids year, my friend. We'll go back to McGee now. Sorry, McGee is not a Hall of Famer, right? But he's one of those players that people talk about and debate. When I started reading articles about him. And if you read about McGee, there's a few things that come into play of people say why he's not in the Hall of Fame. Because certainly his numbers, if you look at his stats, I mean, he's there for that era of baseball. But one, he played in the Baker Bowl, which in Philadelphia, and around the league was known as, the cigar box or bandbox because of its size and to play in. It was a beautiful field when it was built, but it was unorthodox. And in right field, had its equivalent to really the Green Monster in Fenway. So you can think of the Green Monster, but theirs was in right field at the Baker Bowl. So the Green Monster in Fenway is 310 feet away in left field, and it is 37 feet high. In comparison, the right field fence in the Baker Bowl was only 272 feet away, and it was 40 feet high. So, I mean, McGee was a great hitter, and he took advantage of that, they said, and, he'd bang it off the wall. It was like a brick covered in tin for a while, 40 feet high, so, people talked about the noise it would make when he would clang one off that wall, or he'd hit home runs over it. Later on, that wall, after he left, was actually increased to 60 feet high, and they had an extension fence on it, so, crazy, and they repositioned the field a little bit. But the second reason people talk about him not getting into the Hall of Fame is he would, the first class was 1936, and he had passed away 7 years before then. And think about the legends that were put in the Hall of Fame in that first class. So number one, it was a tough class. Number two, he had passed away. There was no like hype or anything about him at that point. It had been a long time, and he really never got any, got a lot of votes. It just didn't happen. So anyway, interesting story. So let's take a look at the back of the card now, because this is also fun. I really enjoyed looking this up and kind of learning more about this industry and what this meant. So this is the polar bear back. The back is cool. I mean, it's pretty clean. I mean, I'm saying clean for a card this old. I mean, it has stains on it. Whatever, man. It's awesome. To me, it's even better that way. It was in loose leaf and scrap tobacco. So. Give me a break. Anyway, so that's the back of the card. I'll leave it zoomed in a little bit. And I really had fun looking this up. I mean, it's a cool industry, cool history to where these cards came from and how it got to this point. So, Polar Bear was a scrap or loose tobacco, and most of the companies at this time were cigarette companies. This was a loose or scrap tobacco company. So there were 16 brands under the American Tobacco Company at the time this was made. And the American Tobacco Company was a merger of many tobacco companies, including one we all know, and love their cards, is Allen and Ginter, right? Famous. So the history of why this happened was the most interesting thing that I found and learned more about. I kind of knew the timeline, but I didn't know the specifics behind it, to be honest. But back then, a very skilled person could do about 4 cigarettes per minute. So in 1880, 1881, a game changer, was introduced, and that was a mechanical cigarette rolling machine that was invented by James Albert Bonsack. So due to various reasons and like mechanical issues, all but one of the major tobacco companies passed, including Allen Ginter, But James Buchanan Duke, who was the son of William Duke, founder of William Duke and Sons Tobacco, he did not. He went right after this machine, this mechanical device. He overhauled it with his mechanics to improve it, and soon it could do the work of 48 cigarette rollers. So huge now mass production. With the new machine, Duke supplied 40% of the cigarettes to the market by 1890. So not even 10 years later, he had 40% of the market. And then at that point, he bought / consolidated his 4 major competitors, including Allen and Ginter, under what they call the American Tobacco Company. So there's a lot more to this story, but it was fun to research. That's a high level of kind of how things evolved in the tobacco industry and how we got to where we are here for this card. But the Polar Bear Company, let's get back to the Polar Bear, right? In 1909, the Middleton branch at the American Tobacco Company in Ohio was huge. That's where Polar Bear was. It employed 1,700 people and could process 150,000 pounds of tobacco a day. So incredible. But it was so well known that the train conductors would literally just call out, Polar Bear instead of Middletown when they're pulling into the station. And everyone knew exactly where they were, and what was going on. So that's the fun story that I have in some of my research I did about Sherry Maggie, where he played, his career, and the tobacco industry in particular, some of the Polar Bear, and how that came to be. So again, it was fun to make. I hope everyone enjoys it. We'll take another look at this card here in the front before we go. And this is my T206 Sherry McGee with bat Phillies. Thanks everyone for watching so much. Appreciate it. Hope everyone's doing well. Talk to you soon. Be good.